So before the break, we were talking about your story and your life, and you were just starting to sort of accept some help, but you weren't going to allow them to change you. But you've learned through your journey that it's okay to accept help. And do you think that is really was that sort of the pivotal point when you started allowing people to help you, that things started to actually change for the positive?
I think that's very true. I mean, I grew up believing that no one cared. And I got those messages by watching my parents go into a helping organization, and there would be plastic or glass between them and the people they were asking for help. And seeing my parents not treated so well, be ignored or be talked down to, or like, what's wrong with you? And so I came to believe that no one cared. And here in this pilot program, I was coming into contact with people who were clearly demonstrating that they cared. And when they shared their life stories with me, I had bought into the idea that everybody starts the same, because that's kind of the message of our country. Well, everyone has the same chance.
Well,
so
yeah.
I believed that. But I thought that meant everyone had our life. Everyone was homeless. Everyone didn't have literacy. Everyone started like we started, but they were smarter than us somehow because they figured it out. And I couldn't figure out, how did they do it? I didn't know, because we're so segregated.
Mm-hmm.
If you really think about who do middle class people spend time with, it's not folks in that war zone of poverty. And
right,
so
we generally tend to hang around with people of our, social and economic level, and yeah. Well,
so when I was listening to their stories, I was thinking, wow, you lived in one house your whole childhood? You went to one school? You've never been hungry?
These were foreign concepts.
I saw everyone, and I saw that was powerful, because then I realized, well, I'm not so stupid. No wonder I'm over here. Of course I would be over here with those kinds of variables going on. So at that moment I wrote in my diary, I'm going to try to get the GED they're talking about. Then maybe I'll be somebody. I mean, that was my dream, because poverty, particularly generational poverty, where your parents have experienced it, your grandparents have experienced it, it doesn't teach you that there are possibilities.
Right.
And what most experts would describe in America is because we really don't educate people about poverty, what you end up doing is blame the people. We're the only country in the world that teaches people they're the cause of poverty. I mean, could you imagine in a third world country someone saying, if you just work harder in this third world country, you wouldn't be poor? Or, if you just made better choices in this third world country, you wouldn't be poor. I mean, you wouldn't hear that, because they're very clear that there are real causes for poverty. What can people earn? What will that buy? But here we sort of have this belief that all you got to do is work hard, in spite of statistics like census tells us 2/3 of the people living in poverty are not working one job, they're working 1.7 jobs, and they can't even afford rent on a modest 2-bedroom apartment. So
it's not about working hard, it really is about educating.
Right.
And it's about, let's for a second here talk about poverty and what it really is, because it's not necessarily somebody living in their car under a bridge. That's part of it, but having lived that, and having that been generational, that's what your parents knew, that's what their parents knew. Your understanding of it is much more in depth than somebody like myself who's fortunate enough to never have had to be in that situation. Mm-hmm. So tell me, what is poverty today?
Well, one of the concepts I teach is there are so many life experiences that we put under that one word, poverty. So there's immigrant poverty, there's situational poverty, there's generational poverty, working class poverty, and each of these life experiences are described as if they're the same, and in fact quite different. And here's an example I think that will illuminate that. My doctoral research, I wanted to interview people who grew up in generations of poverty who had achieved bachelor's degrees, because I couldn't find their voices in the literature. You don't tend to hear from people from generational poverty, sometimes working class, but not generational. So I started putting out a call for candidates for my research, and I had several people replied. One man said, I'll do your study for you. He said, I grew up poor. And I said, well, help me understand, how'd your family get by? And he said, well, my father was a physician and died when I was 12. And I had to go live with my grandparents, and I worked in their store, and I pulled myself up. And now I'm a physician. And I'm looking at him through the lens of generational poverty, through spending 28 years of my life pretty much homeless. And I'm thinking, you knew someone who owned a store?
Yeah.
And you were related to them? From my worldview, that's not poverty. But from his worldview, if you look from his perspective, who do the children of professionals spend time with? Other children of professionals who aren't going to live with grandma, who aren't going to work in a store. So through his eyes, he grew up poor. And what results in this country, because we don't educate about poverty, is someone with that experience, how would they treat somebody from generational poverty? Probably like this: hey, I did it, why can't? Because there's no acknowledgement of what would having a father who's a physician for 12 years do for your vocabulary.
Oh, yeah.
Or your exposure to possibilities, or your network of support. So there's a lot of taken for granted advantages that we don't realize because of that mixing up of what is poverty. Even the federal government doesn't have a clear definition. The definition the federal government uses is the Federal Poverty Guideline, which is based on an economic model from the 1960s. They use a formula from the 60s that fundamentally says families spend 1/3 of their income on food. Therefore, we'll multiply that by 3, and that'll be our guide to see who gets help, who doesn't get help. Today's economists say, wait a minute, families don't spend 1/3 of their income on food. Bulk of income goes for shelter. So, and a lot of dynamics have changed since the 60s. More women in the workplace, more people commuting, healthcare not provided very often by employers. So those 3 major family expenses are not in the Federal Poverty Guideline for 2011. Mm-hmm. So the federal government has about 22,000 as the guideline for a family of 4. Recent research is adding in healthcare, transportation, and what am I forgetting? Healthcare, transportation.
There's another one in there.
Healthcare, transportation,
housing,
and childcare.
Oh,
childcare, healthcare, transportation, and childcare. And if you add in those costs in today's economic situation, they say a family of 4 needs about 68,000, not 22.
Yeah, so we're way off.
So then the census, of course, uses that faulty guideline as a number to count how many people live in poverty. So they say 38 million live in poverty using that 22,000 for a family of 4. What would happen if we used the 68,000, which is the real indicator for 2011, and you'd probably begin to understand why you see so many people who make too much to get financial aid, or make too much to get help with rent or food stamps when they really, really need it.
Right,
such a faulty
because
indicator.
We're basing it on such a skewed number.
Yeah. But our current economic issue is, the biggest issue is situational poverty right now. So you've got folks who've never lived poverty. They have middle class language, they've had middle class exposure, experiences, and their homes are being foreclosed or they're being downsized.
And I want to talk to you about situational poverty. I wish we had more time, but when we come back, we will talk about that. And I want to talk about you for just a minute or two about some of the accomplishments that you've had, and hopefully it'll inspire folks that this can be done. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Still to come.
And a lot of times I find that their questions will frame the answers. And so we don't really get at the experiences